My ex-brother-in-law and I had been secretly dating for 5 years. He finally said yes to my proposal for the 30th time, but on the wedding night, I was blindfolded, thrown into a place where beggars gather. Those people sneered and started tearing my clothes. Don't pretend. Bring those 5 wolf dogs here. Let her know the consequences of offending me. When I was about to die, he came rushing over, with panic in his eyes, rushed me to the hospital. I was in a daze. I heard him talking to his friend. Daniel, isn't it a bit too much for us to do this? Back then, Emily disregarded her own safety. She saved you from the beggar's nest, and she got an ear injury. And now you're pushing her into the fire with your own hands. I know you'd do anything for Sophia, but can we do it in a less sinister way? Make her feel better. Daniel gently patted my back. His tone is gentle, but his eyes are cold. Be nice to her. Is she worth it? If it wasn't for her, my parents would have been found out and killed. If she hadn't interfered with my relationship with Sophia, Sophia wouldn't have left in disappointment. She wouldn't have gotten into a car accident. She's still in a coma. She owes Sophia all this. She has to pay back. The two of them are still talking and laughing. I feel like I've fallen into a freezer, but he doesn't know anything about it. I've heard it all before. Harry Lucas is a bit flustered. Daniel, you have to speak softly, in case he stops before he's finished speaking. He suddenly remembers. I'm just a deaf man who can't hear well. I'm not a threat to him. Daniel notices his uneasiness. Couldn't help but smile. Her hearing aid broke a long time ago. Now she can't hear anything. Why are you so nervous? Even if you just said something unpleasant in front of her, she'll just think you're complimenting her. She's just an insignificant person. Why do you care? Lucas is still a bit worried. But what if one day she knows the truth? Then what to do? The man smiled disdainfully. She's deaf. What could she make a mess of? Even if she does realize something, I'll just say a few words and I'll be able to coax her out of it. She's the kind of girl who's gentle and well-behaved. She'll stay by my side. You don't have to worry. The person on the other side frowned. There was silence for a while, after a long time before slowly said, "But didn't she also save you back then? For your sake." She even almost lost her hearing completely. She's been in the limelight since she was a child because of her musical talent. But this incident changed her life completely. She was even almost expelled from the family. Don't you have any sympathy for her? So what? Daniel's hand suddenly increased in strength. It made the back of my neck hurt. I almost screamed. He seems a bit impatient. Lucas said helplessly, "I've already contacted the publicist, told them the wedding was canceled. But the press are here. You know how they are. They are waiting to grab the first news to attract attention. How can they leave so easily? Then send another invitation to the media company. Tell them that Anderson Group is holding a new product launch in a week's time. There would be even heavier news waiting for them then." Daniel raised his eyebrows. There was a sneer in his eyes. He looked at me, slowly said, "The second daughter of the Anderson family has been secretly having an illicit relationship with her brother-in-law for years." When things were about to be exposed, not only did she not repent, on the contrary, because of her anger, she had an affair with someone else when she was discovered. She was accompanied by several wolf dogs. The whole person was disheveled, hair disheveled. Like a madman, he leaned forward slightly, eyes staring straight at him, asked with a hint of a smile, "You said, this news, is it strong enough?" Lucas listened, heart a little intolerant. He said, "Daniel, don't forget she saved your life." Before Daniel heard that word. Daniel heard that word and immediately lost control of his emotions. "It's all right. Don't bring it up again. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be in this situation," he said softly. The tone was soft but cold. "She has only herself to blame. She put drugs in my wine, took the opportunity to get close to me, and forced me to be with her afterward. It's really unacceptable." The corners of his mouth rose slightly, although his voice was gentle, but it reveals a piercing chill. I thought to myself, this genius who was once in the Anderson family, what else can he do now to make a comeback? Once the car arrived at the hospital entrance, I lost too much blood. My body was as cold as ice. Almost can't feel the temperature. The rough silver wrist clasp on his wrist rubbed my wound even worse, but I clenched my teeth. Not a word was uttered. I recognized the wrist clasp. It was the peace sign Sophia had hand-carved for him when he was a child. Normally, he treasured it especially. He only wore it when he went to see Sophia. He picked me up. His palm was warm, hurriedly walking towards the hospital, but I could no longer feel the warmth of his body. I couldn't help shedding tears. At the age of 10, I tried to help him block the beggar's fatal blow. The stick hit me hard on my forehead. I was in a coma for 10 whole days. Woke up only to find that everything had changed. Due to the nerve damage in my ear, the doctor judged that I would not be able to recover in the future. At that time, I was recognized as a musical genius. My father took extra care of me as a frail child because of it. I fell from the top to the bottom. What was once praise turned into sharp ridicule. There were also rumors that I had an illicit relationship with him for the sake of it. Only then did I go out of my way to save him. Amidst the accusations of the crowd, he raised his hand and swore coldly. Said he, Daniel, wasn't afraid of that. He would take care of me for the rest of my life. I took him at his word, heeded his advice, voluntarily gave up the best chance for treatment, being his canary. I was so happy that he would spoil me forever. I didn't realize until now. From the beginning to the end, I was a big joke, original. All the sufferings are originated from him. He sensed that I was not right. Looked down at me. I found that my face was full of tears. His originally cold face immediately showed a look of heartache and panic. He hurriedly took out the hearing aid he had with him from his pocket, gently put it on for me. When he spoke, he also slowed down his speed. His lips were pressed against mine. His movements became extra careful. Emily, you're finally awake. Don't cry. What happened? What's wrong with you? His voice was still gentle, even gentler than ever, but I inexplicably felt a chill coming from him, with his hand quickly spreading all over his body, so cold that I kept shivering. His frown tightened. Sternly, he shouted to the nurse next to him, "What are you guys still standing for? Where is the doctor? Hurry up and save her." As soon as the door to the resuscitation room closed, I immediately saw him walking quickly towards Sophia's hospital room. When I woke up again, I was the only one left in the ward. I froze for a while. I finally picked up the phone and called Aunt Lily, who was abroad. I said, "Aunt Lily, I want to go to San Francisco to look for you. Please help me with the immigration procedures as soon as possible. The sooner the better." I had just booked a plane ticket for a week later. The door of the hospital room was suddenly pushed open. I looked up. Daniel was standing in the doorway, eyes full of surprise. He walked in quickly. "Emily, you're awake. How do you feel now? How do you feel now?" His warm hand was placed gently on my forehead. He tested the temperature. I realized it wasn't hot anymore. Then he sat down with peace of mind. "You've been running a fever since last night's resuscitation." I was so worried that I didn't sleep the whole night. "Luckily, you're awake now. It's really great." I looked at his eyes that were full of joy. My heart was a little complicated. The heartbroken expression on his face looked real. The tone of his voice was also gentle. It was as if the person who said he would destroy me yesterday didn't even exist. If I hadn't heard those words with my own ears last night, I might still be like before, mesmerized by his gentle appearance. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he smiled helplessly, with a doting look, picking up the hot porridge in his hand, softly coaxed me. "Listen, your body is weak now. You need to replenish your energy first. Eat this bowl of congee first." "Okay," I frowned, subconsciously avoided his hand that reached out to feed me, seeing that I was not very cooperative. The smile on his face froze for a moment. However, he quickly adjusted his mood. A bit chagrined, he muttered to himself, "It's all my fault. Focused on worrying about you. I forgot that this porridge is still too hot. Emily, wait for me. I'll get you something else to eat." He kissed me on the forehead. Then he turned around and left. But he was in a hurry. He didn't realize he left his cell phone on the bed. I looked at the door to make sure no one was guarding it. Then I picked up the cell phone. The cell phone showed a 4-digit password. I knew my birthday must be wrong, so I didn't try. Tried several times, but it didn't work. I frowned and thought about it. Silently typed in Sophia's birthday. Sure enough, the phone unlocked immediately. My heart suddenly tightened, trying hard to suppress that strange feeling. Picked up the cell phone. At this time, the screen suddenly lit up. A top message popped up. "Brother Daniel, where are you now? I want to eat seafood porridge. Can you make it for me with your own hands?" The avatar was familiar. I recognized it as my own sister. "Sophia, Sophia. Yesterday, I came out of the operating room. Yesterday, I came out of the operating room." In a daze, I heard Daniel shouting excitedly. He said Sophia has been in a coma for so many years. Now she's finally awake. I held back the sadness in my heart, deliberately not to read that message, froze and clicked on his cell phone album. The first one was a bright wedding invitation design. His and her names were written side by side in small golden seals. It looked especially intimate. The wedding was scheduled for the day after Anderson Group's new product launch. Next, I saw a second piece of paper, It was written with a statement of breaking off relations with me. My vision blurred. Tears slid across my chin, dropped on the cell phone screen, swooshing both names away. He had arranged it so seamlessly. One day, he publicly clarified his relationship with me. Leaving me in disrepute. And the next day, he married the Anderson family's first lady. It was announced that the two families had cleared the air. They're working together. Everything seemed perfect, except for me. I was the only victim in this drama. Daniel's bowl of porridge had been waiting all day. In the evening, he rushed back to the ward, rummaged around the room. When he found the cell phone hidden in the folds of the quilt, there was first a look of joy on his face. Then, with a wary look at me, he saw that my eyes were closed, breathing steadily, as if I was really asleep. Then he was relieved. He turned off the light, told the person outside the door to take care of me. Then he quickly left again. I heard that ambiguous sound from the next ward again, closing my eyes. Tears slipped from the corners of my eyes. The day I was discharged from the hospital, deliberately avoided the bodyguards arranged by Daniel, quietly went to get a visa. Before I left, I saw a church next to it. I thought I would go in and make a wish. When I came out of the God of Wealth Hall, I accidentally saw two familiar figures coming out of the Hall of Marriage. Sophia and Daniel walked to the tree full of red silk. With their own hands, they hung a wooden plaque with their names engraved on it. I stood in the shadows, watching their backs. It was as if my heart was slowly crushed by something, like a silent avalanche, waiting for them to walk away. Only then did I slowly walk over, looked up at the wooden sign. The names Daniel and Sophia were carved on it. Next to it was written a line from the sign: "Do not envy the lovebirds, nor envy the gods." The handwriting was clear, but it seemed to be deeply imprinted in my heart. I was staring at the sign. Suddenly, someone behind me called me, "Emily." I turned around and saw Daniel standing not far away. Daniel was standing not far away, holding a bouquet of lilies in his hand. A quick flash of nervousness passes over his face. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I smiled slightly. My tone was calm. I was discharged from the hospital, out for some air. He realized at once, desperately wanted to explain something. At this time, Sophia gently took his hand, gently said, "Emily, what a coincidence, you are here too." She pointed to the Hall of In-Laws and asked, "You've come to ask for this too?" I nodded. I looked at the lily in his hand. Faintly, I said, "I'm leaving," turned around and was about to leave. Daniel rushed forward to pull me, said anxiously, "Emily, you do not think too much. Sophia and I came here specifically to seek peace. A few days ago, you went through that incident. I was so heartbroken that I couldn't sleep for a few nights in a row. This flower was specially chosen for you. I was going to pick you up with Sophia. You have to believe me. I really haven't forgotten that today is the day you were discharged from the hospital." I looked down at the lily. After a while, suddenly smiled. If he really cared about me, would have known. I've been allergic to lily's pollen since I was a kid. Sophia was the only one who liked the flower. The atmosphere is a little tense. Daniel held on to my hand. There was no intention of letting me go. After a few seconds, Sophia suddenly frowns, said in a weak voice, "Daniel, brother, me, I feel a bit uncomfortable." Daniel panicked at once. "Sophia, don't be afraid. I'll take you to the hospital right away." He let go of my sleeve. He turned to me. "Emily, you go back first. I will take your sister to the hospital," he said. He left quickly. I looked at their distant backs. I froze for a while, without realizing it. I reached out and touched the wooden sign. Suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Laughed so hard that tears flowed down my face. Suddenly, an indescribable sadness welled up in my heart. The feeling quickly spread all over my body. I don't know where the strength came from. Violently tore down the wooden sign. Heavy fall on the ground. The wooden sign broke in half. The cracked traces were particularly blinding. My heart suddenly became empty. Some things, once broken, it can never be restored. The launch is coming up. Daniel excused me to rest more. He took away my cell phone. What he doesn't know is, for the wedding surprise, I've long quietly bought another cell phone card. Haven't touched my cell phone for days. Open microblogging. I found that my name was on the hot search. It turns out that he's been operating behind the scenes these past few days, hiring people to push the envelope. Sophia released a new single under her name. The melody is very melodious. The comment section immediately became lively. The famous Anderson family's second young lady. Wasn't she said to be very talented? Why hasn't there been any news about her all these years? I think she probably stole her sister's work in order to be famous. She really doesn't even care about her face. It's still our Sophia who's real, unlike some people, bragging about being a genius all day long. In fact, they're nothing. I'm speechless. I silently browsed through the comments until I saw the name of the song Lost Footing. One late night a few years ago, I improvised this song. I was in love with Daniel at the time, naively thinking the world was against me. I was stubborn enough to go against everyone. Until now, I've fallen all over the place. I finally saw that he didn't love me at all. I decided to make it work. I left Daniel of my own accord. But now, she's taking away even these memories. I can't control it, I cried. All those suppressed emotions came out like a flood, drowning out my sanity. I clutched the cell phone tightly. My fingers turned white. My heart ached like it was being cut by a knife. At this time, the cell phone suddenly vibrated. A strange number sent a message. Have you decided? I looked at the screen. The sight was blurred by tears, but I clenched my teeth. I thought it through. I'm going to make him disappear from my life forever. As a newcomer to the industry, Anderson Group's launch attracted many big names in the industry. As the center of attention, Sophia is wearing a long dress customized for her by a famous designer. On her arm, she is holding Daniel, who is wearing a straight suit. The two of them walk into the venue elegantly. They look like a perfect couple, smiling, politely accepting congratulations. I'm a little late. As soon as I entered the venue, immediately there were murmurs around me. Everyone looked at me with a sneer in their eyes. This is the former genius of the Anderson family, Emily. Emily, it's true that her sister is not as beautiful as her, but what's the point of being beautiful? It's just a decoration. If you don't even have the inside, you're not even a decoration. It's not even a decoration. I see. This man is a straw man. Sophia also heard those comments. At first her face was a bit ugly, but in the end, the way she looked at me slowly became mocking. My ears were suddenly jarred a bit. I couldn't help but look at Daniel. I only saw him glance at me somewhat sheepishly. Then he turned his head away as if nothing had happened. He deliberately turned up the sound of his hearing aid, as if he was afraid that I wouldn't be able to hear those disparaging words. In the past, if I had found out that he was doing this, I would have thought that he was afraid that I wouldn't be able to hear what the people around me were saying, that I'd be laughed at. But now, I shook my head helplessly. It's all going to end anyway. Let's just leave it at that. The launch party started soon after. Sophia was placed in the very center of the first row, sitting next to Daniel, and my seat was purposely placed closest to the press corps. The heavy radio equipment was placed next to me. Somehow it interfered with the hearing aids. It made a shrill current sound. I couldn't quite hear what the people on stage were saying. Daniel walked onto the stage. His straight suit made him look even taller in the light. He glanced toward the stage. There was tenderness in his eyes. He briefly introduced the company's new products. A loud applause rang out from the stage. Everyone thought it was time to move on to the next segment. He suddenly turned his head. His eyes looked straight at me on the stage. There was a trace of an elusive smile on his face. He said, "Everyone has waited for so long. At today's conference, I have one more important thing to tell all my media friends." He gave a wink towards his assistant in the background. The assistant immediately understood what he meant. When he looked up at me again, there was more than a hint of intolerance in his eyes. Sophia obviously also noticed the change in his expression in that moment. She gritted her teeth, suddenly stood up under the gaze of the crowd. Next, Emily's reputation would be completely ruined. Daniel would publicize their relationship and marriage to everyone, waiting for tomorrow. She'll be able to become Mrs. Anderson with a straight face. For this plan to succeed, she's been in bed for 2 whole years. Now it's just one last step away from success. She would never allow anyone to ruin her plan. She quickly ran onto the stage, seriously said to the special assistant, "Didn't you hear what Brother Daniel said? Don't be dumbfounded. Hurry up and put it on." She looked up at me. The corners of her mouth rose slightly. The red lips gently opened and closed. The shape of those lips clearly said, "My good sister, you are finished." As soon as the video started, the audience under the stage immediately held their breath in surprise. The 2 people on stage had their backs to the big screen, completely unaware of what was happening, still continuing to say the lines they had prepared long ago. "Everyone, I'm so sorry. You should have heard about my interruption of the wedding 2 days ago. I'm sure you're all surprised. I'd like to apologize. That day, my fiancé and I had an argument over a small matter, but later I realized She had an illicit relationship with someone else behind my back a long time ago. Even more than that. He slightly inclined his head. He looked both disappointed and surprised. He said, "My fiancée grew up in poor health, spoiled. I'd like to ask everyone to spare her this time. I will discipline her well, to punish her. I've decided to cut ties with her from now on. He talks about what's good for me, but puts all the blame on me, trying to make me the target of everyone's attack." I looked at the man on the stage. Suddenly he became strange. "There's one more thing," he went on. He smiled slightly, eyes gently looking at the person beside him. "After this experience, I finally realized who I really love. I missed her before for various reasons, but fate has given me another chance. This time I will definitely not miss it." He continued, "Tomorrow is my wedding to Sophia. I hope everyone can come to attend." The stage was surprisingly quiet. The applause and praise that was expected did not appear. The reporters not only ignored him, they also looked at him with a strange look in their eyes. He suddenly felt a pang of uneasiness, hurrying back to take a look. There were indeed some surprising images in the video, but the white background looked more and more familiar. Taking a closer look, that was actually him and Sophia. The special assistant saw this scene. Panicked, he tried to force the computer to shut down, but to his horror, he realized that the computer had already been controlled by someone else. In the video, Sophia's hair was messy, her face is flushed, sitting on top of a man. The man is holding her tightly, voice hoarse. The sound of the video was turned up continuously. The meeting room was suddenly filled with the man's low panting and the woman's soft, helpless moans. Sophia calmed her breathing, then said, "Sophia, obey. In a few days, I'll cut ties with that sister of yours. As soon as that video is exposed, she will definitely lose her reputation." She then asked, "But you're embarrassing her. What if she finds out the truth? What if she retaliates against us?" Daniel grunted coldly. The tone of his voice seemed unconcerned. "Don't worry. When she is scolded to the point of crying, I'll do it again like when I was a child. Pretend to speak up for her. Let her stay by my side for the rest of her life without fear. She's like that. Wouldn't she be unwilling?" There was someone guarding the door at the time. Daniel thought I was asleep. He didn't lower his voice when he spoke. In broad daylight, he did this with that woman in the hospital. People at the scene were in an uproar. Sophia cried and hid backstage. Daniel stood on the stage and shouted in panic for his assistant to turn off the equipment. But it wouldn't turn off. He panicked for a moment, slammed the computer on the ground. It was finally quiet, but that short and bizarre video had said it all. Soon, the reporters who came back to their senses surrounded Daniel. They seemed particularly agitated. The camera microphones disliked him directly. As soon as they opened their mouths, they asked explosive questions. "Mr. Daniel, you said before that you would break off your relationship with Emily. Now you are releasing this kind of video. Is it to publicize your relationship with Sophia?" "Daniel, what exactly is that video Sophia mentioned? What else happened to you guys when you were kids? Did you try to hurt her like you did today, but didn't succeed?" I said to Daniel, "Please explain this time." My mood had calmed down in the midst of all the noise. I took one last look at Daniel, then I left without looking back. After dealing with those reporters, Daniel was exhausted. He subconsciously opened his address book. He wanted to talk to someone. His finger lingered on Sophia's name for a long time, but finally dialed Emily's number. The phone rang for a long time, but it stayed occupied on the other side. Daniel thought of an unlikely idea, couldn't help but frown. There was some uneasiness in his heart. He hurriedly called his assistant. "Lend me your cell phone." The special assistant didn't dare to ask more, carefully handed over the cell phone. He dialed the phone again, but he heard the message that the number you have dialed is switched off. The atmosphere became tense all of a sudden. Daniel's forehead veins bulged, although he did not say anything, but the special assistant inexplicably felt a chill. I saw him holding my cell phone tightly. The phone seemed to be almost deformed by his squeeze. I tried to call him. "Daniel." Total Daniel suddenly. He snapped. He smashed both cell phones in his hand. The glass instantly shattered all over the place. The special assistant looked worried. Before he could open his mouth, just saw him pick up the car keys, walked out with a gloomy face. He had just gotten into the car and was ready to leave. The passenger door was suddenly opened. He frowned, saw Sophia's face pale, voice a little trembling. "Brother Daniel, where are you going? Take me with you, okay?" "I am. I'm not feeling well." "Can you?" Her voice sounded especially weak. Daniel used to always put her health above all else. It never worked, But this time, Daniel didn't even bother trying to guess if she was really uncomfortable. He just interrupted her with a frown. There was even a hint of impatience in his tone. "Let the special assistant accompany you. I'm very busy right now." The man's cold expression made her panic inside. He had never spoken so loudly to her before, and now yet, she hadn't even looked back. Daniel had sidled over, snatched the car door out of her hand, slammed it shut. Then he kicked the gas. The car sped away. He raced all the way back to Anderson's house, pushed open the door to find the house dark. He stood in the doorway. His voice was shaking. "Emily, come out." There was no answer. "Emily, stop it. Come on out, I apologize." Okay, the room was still silent. He felt a sudden uneasiness. He turned on the light. That's when he realized, do not know when. The appearance of the house has been completely different. Emily's everything had disappeared. The spacious wedding room was now empty. Only the cold wind whistled. He suddenly fell helplessly to his knees, hugged himself tightly, cried so hard that he couldn't speak. He had always thought that Emily only had him in her heart, never thought she would leave. He, even in order to make her suffer, deliberately sent Sophia to a horrible place like Beggars' Nest, just to make Sophia happy. He clearly knew how dangerous it was there, but still did it without hesitation. Suddenly, a strong light flashed by. He looked up, to find it was the nanny hurrying back. He staggered over and asked, "Where did Emily go?" The other replied, "Sir, Emily left a few days ago, said she was traveling. What's she doing traveling for someone who can't hear?" The servant gave him a careful look, said, "Daniel, hasn't Emily recovered? I saw her the other day without even wearing a hearing aid, and could still chat with us easily." Daniel didn't listen further. When he heard that sentence, he froze. Emily could hear now. That was a horrible thought that popped into his mind. Nervously, he clenched his fists, only barely able to stand still. He suddenly remembered. He had seen Emily in the church a few days ago. He didn't care at the time. Now it suddenly occurred to him. The immigration office is next to church. What is she doing there? Daniel's heart tightened. His mind was suddenly in a mess. Emily could already hear. She had actually regained her hearing a long time ago, but never told him. He recalled bits and pieces of the past. Those blurred memories became extra clear now, when she saw him holding Sophia, with sarcasm in her eyes that night when he retrieved his cell phone. Didn't notice the tears in the corner of her eyes when he was taken to the resuscitation room. The moment he turned to leave, despair written all over her face, even earlier. Earlier that day, she had overheard his conversation with his friend. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, nails pinched deep into his palms. The pain sobered him up a little. He suddenly turned around, stormed out of the house, runs directly toward the immigration processing office next to church. The car was speeding through the night. Emily kept popping into his head. She used to trust him so much, loved him so much, but he hurt her again and again, even for the sake of Sophia, pushed her into a desperate situation. He chanted softly. Emily's tone was full of sadness. He rushed to the immigration office, only to find that it was empty. The staff told him Emily had completed the formalities and left a few days ago. That day, he went with Sophia to seek marriage. It's ironic to think about it now. Daniel stood in the empty hall. His heart was empty, as if it had been emptied out by something. He pulled out his cell phone with shaking hands, dialed Emily's number. The cold, mechanical female voice was still on the other end of the phone. He desperately sent her messages, one after another, but all the messages were like falling into the sea. There was no reply. "Emily, please come back." He leaned against the wall. Tears blurred his eyes. Daniel closed his eyes. His heart was full of regret and loneliness. "Emily, I'm sorry." 2 hours later. 2 hours later, the plane landed in the capital of San Francisco. I just got off the plane. I saw Aunt Lily waiting for me with flowers. As soon as she saw me, her eyes lit up. She smiled and hugged me into her arms. "I know all about you and Daniel. Luckily, you were smart this time. You didn't let him fool you. When Aunt Lily told you, it's easier without love. You didn't believe me. Now look. Aunt Lily was right, wasn't she?" She blinked. Obviously 40 years old, but as energetic as a girl in her 20s. Even more lively than me. We were having fun. A man's low voice suddenly came from behind us. "Miss, good noon." I turned my head to look, surprised to find a man who looks especially like Daniel. I clearly remember. I saw him that night. It was. Aunt Lily shrugged, said was going to tie you up, and purposely found someone who looked like him, trying to trick you into coming back. But she took a step back, took a good look at me, nodded and said, "Now it seems, you really don't need it." It's a good thing I lied to them about taking you to the doctor in the first place. Only then did I take you away for a few years. Let you practice your kung fu. Now you can handle those tough guys. If your mom had listened to me, she wouldn't have married the Andersons. Now she might have seen me in a bad mood. She waved her hand. No more. Now that you're back. She can also rest assured I heart a sour. I hugged her tightly. Aunt Lily, thank you. Daniel left me in a beggar's nest. In order to survive, I had to fight for my life with 5 ferocious wolf dogs. I practiced sparring for a few years when I was young, but he's been overprotecting me all these years. Hardly let me do any strenuous exercise. My physical strength was therefore much weaker than before, just as I was being driven to near despair by the leading wolf dog. Suddenly, a kick flew out from in front of me, kicking the wolf dog that was about to pounce on me hard. When I managed to slow down from the fear of death, I looked up. In front of me stood a blurry and tall figure. The light was dim. I couldn't see too clearly. I only felt that his eyebrows and Daniel were particularly similar. He quickly settled those wolf dogs, then handed me a blood-stained business card. Said, Missy, Mr. Anderson asked me to tell you, if you want to leave someday, you can do it anytime. If you want to retaliate, this is my contact information. Feel free to contact me. This Mr. Anderson is actually my Aunt Lily, who has been keeping a low profile for years, but is actually very rich. My grandpa only has 2 daughters. My grandfather only had 2 daughters. The oldest daughter died in a tragic accident, and the youngest daughter left home. She was never heard from again. Daniel didn't know I had an Aunt Lily. He thought I could only rely on the Anderson family. Plus, I'm hard of hearing, so he never thought I was a threat to him. The video that was taken at the hospital. The video taken at the hospital was actually shot by my Aunt Lily, who secretly paid off the bodyguard at the entrance. She secretly filmed it. She did that just to help me get justice one day. Later, I slowly settled down in San Francisco. I continued to finish my studies that I didn't finish when I was a child. When I was young, an old professor invited me to San Francisco many times. She wanted to mentor me herself, but at that time, I was completely attracted to Daniel. I politely declined. I found out later that she was also my mom's teacher. She was also my mom's former teacher. The gray-haired professor looked at me with tears in her eyes, as if recalling another young girl. Good. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. I purposely ignored any news related to the Anderson family. I focused on my studies. Aunt Lily also had all messages blocked that might disturb me. Slowly, I was making a name for myself in the music industry. I had a loyal following. Every time I performed, the audience applauded, tears on their faces. It was as if they too had experienced a rebirth through my music. I finally found my own stage and life. A few years later, I received an invitation to perform in my home country, playing the very same adapted version of Lost Footing. Now, I call this song Rebirth. When the last note fell, a loud applause rang out from the stage. I opened my eyes, looked into the audience, suddenly saw a familiar person in the middle of the first row. That person had a full beard. It looked very tired, but his dress still gave it away. He should have been a very dignified person before. My heart tightened, fingers trembled slightly, but soon calmed down. Daniel, I can't believe he's here. The show was over. I was backstage removing my makeup. The assistant rushed in. She looked a little nervous. She said, Sister, there's a man outside who wants to see you. The security guard couldn't stop him. I didn't have time to say anything. The door was pushed open. Daniel was standing in the doorway. He looked at me with complicated eyes. Suddenly, he flung himself on his knees. The little assistant was too surprised to speak. The room was so quiet that only his heavy breathing could be heard. The man's voice was hoarse, slightly trembling, as if it was squeezed out hard from the depths of his throat. He said, Emily, I've come to beg your forgiveness. I stared at him coldly. Suddenly, I laughed. Daniel, who are you to ask me to forgive you? He opened his mouth, as if he had something to say, but I didn't give him a chance. I directly interrupted him when you, for Sophia, did not hesitate to push me into the abyss. My eyes were full of you. But what about you? I stared at him. The tone of voice is cold. All you could think about was how to completely destroy me. Daniel's face turned pale. He lowered his head. It took a long time before he said in a shaky voice, I was wrong about what happened back then, but when you left, I really panicked. He quickly rolled up his sleeves. His arms were covered with scars of different shades. Those scars were densely packed. It looked alarming. He said, all these years, I've been thinking about you. Whenever I miss you so much that I can't sleep, I'd make a cut on my arm. His voice was hoarse, with a hint of loss of control. I've been punishing myself for my past mistakes. Emily, why can't you give me a chance? A chance. I smiled coldly. I stared at him with sharp eyes. Did you give me a chance in the first place? When you threw me into the beggars pile, gave me a chance. He froze at once. His throat felt like it was caught on something. Hurriedly tried to explain, but could not say a word. You think I'm going to wait here for you? I took a step forward. I looked down at him. His eyes were cold. Daniel, you make me feel very uncomfortable. His body shuddered. The whole person immediately froze. He lowered his head and stopped talking. I turned around and walked away. I didn't look at him again. Behind him came the sound of his low cries, like a wounded animal wailing, but I didn't feel anything in my heart anymore. I just walked out of the room. There was a sudden noise outside. It's a matter of course to pay what you owe. Pay back the money quickly. You killed so many people. Where's your conscience? Daniel made too much noise just now. It has attracted the attention of passers-by. Some recognized him. Those people shouted. Asked the reporters in the hall who were ready to call it a day to hurry over, saying that there was important news. In the blink of an eye, a group of reporters swarmed over, surrounded Daniel to the hilt. The flashlights kept flashing, so bright that people can't open their eyes. The reporters asked questions. Someone asked, Daniel, I heard that you are not paying your debts. Many people have fallen into despair and even jumped off buildings. Is this true? After the Anderson family went bankrupt. You have been hiding. Why did you suddenly show up today? Daniel was surrounded in the center. His face is ugly, but he didn't say anything. I coldly watched all this. Probably understood what happened from the shouts of those people. After I left back then, he looked for me everywhere like crazy. He even rushed to the immigration office, lost control of his emotions, and hit the staff. As a result, he was detained on the spot. The news of Anderson Group's president beating up the staff quickly spread on the internet. Everyone was shocked. Just when everyone thought things might take a turn for the worse, a lot of people suddenly appeared in the comment section. They were accusing him of having caused his fiancée to suffer serious injuries, almost lost her life, and also went out of their way to destroy Anderson Group for Sophia. Sophia panicked. She kept calling him, but no one ever answered. In desperation, she panicked and ran away. She bumped into the beggars who came to settle the score with her. She had secretly bribed these people before, wanted to get me killed, didn't expect someone to save me. She was furious, refused to pay the rest of the money, and threatened to expose their evil deeds. Those henchmen were furious, stopped her, violated her on the spot, resulting in her untimely death. After the news spread, Anderson Group was immediately surrounded by public opinion. The stock price almost dropped overnight, and Daniel, who had just been released when he heard the news, he could hardly stand up. He almost fell down. It didn't take long. He once again received a call from the funeral parlor, saying that Sophia's body had been sitting there for days. No one came to claim it. A few days ago, the head of the Anderson family had a heart attack and died. People in the Anderson family scattered and ran away. Such a big family. In the end, there's no one left to collect the body. Later, Daniel was organizing Sophia's belongings. Daniel realized the hidden truth. It turns out, when I was planning to run to tell him about the gang's pursuit, but Sophia drugged me in advance, so that I was too sick to get up. She wanted to use this opportunity to save his life, so that he would die for her from then on. But she didn't expect that she met the gang on the road. She was terrorized and scolded, scared out of her wits. Finally had to tell them the location. I was the only one who knew about it at first. Sophia vehemently denied that she knew, so he always thought I caused his parents' death. As it turned out, he was the one who was kept in the dark. When the truth came out, Daniel cried and laughed. He was out of control, like a man out of his mind. Anderson family suddenly went out of business. Before he borrowed the relationship of cooperation with Anderson family, he got a lot of advance payment for the project in advance. Now Anderson family collapsed. The money was taken away by the bank. Those partners are almost all bankrupt. Some of them even chose extreme ways to end their lives. In order to avoid their debt collection, Daniel had to change his name, hiding everywhere. He barely got by with odd jobs. 5 years passed. He finally saved enough money. He bought a ticket to see me, but when he stood in front of me again, he was no longer the same energetic young man. Now, he looked exhausted. The pressure of life has made him lose his former sharpness. He has become lifeless. Watching him surrounded by reporters, I couldn't help but think of the past. At that time, he had also mercilessly pushed me to the center of public opinion. Those gossips were frightening. He really wanted to put me to death at that time. Now, I see him cowering in a corner, shivering, letting those angry people scold him. 5 years have passed. I watched this scene happen again, but my heart was as calm as a pool of stagnant water. I pulled the small assistant beside me who was full of anger and wanted to rush up and teach him a lesson. Shook my head. We prepared to leave. Before leaving, I called the emergency number from an anonymous number. The next morning, I was busy backstage preparing for the last show of the upcoming tour. Suddenly, a news tweet popped up on my cell phone. The headline read, "Former president of Anderson Group fell to his death last night, suspected to have lost his footing from the top floor of the group's headquarters. The remains are badly damaged, difficult to recognize. The popular comments below make people read the heart not feel good. The building collapsed. Just a momentary thing, once brilliant, finally ended in a hurry. Only desolation remains." These are the most famous lyrics of the song Lost Footing back then. I'm holding my cell phone. I was a little bit dazed, until Aunt Lily's voice brought me back to reality. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked me softly. Her eyes are full of concern. "The controller said the show is about to start, asked if you're ready." When I didn't say anything, she took a few steps closer, gently touched my forehead. She comforted me and said, "Don't be nervous if you don't feel well. The show can be postponed a little." I lowered my head, shook it gently, whispered, "I'm fine." I exited the cell phone page, cleared the background, deleted all records of him, past grudges and pain, seems like with the movement of the fingers, disappeared without a trace in a flash. I pulled back the curtain. The stage lights shone on the piano. It seems to be silently guiding me forward. The song Rebirth was playing in the background. It was all over. I took a deep breath, walked towards the center of the stage. The lights flashed, applause thundered from the stage. I understand. My spring, it's just kicking off.